It's that time again. It's been ages. It's felt like ages. It's been maybe a week, which is probably as long as we've been without recording a session. So it's Henry Weston's old mate. It's Phil Walton, your host, along with Stu Butler. Hi, Stu.
Hello, Phil. It feels like I've missed you, mate.
Yeah, it's felt a little bit. We've had two failed attempts, haven't we, to get recording because of flights and travel and just kind of family shit that happens and life gets in the way a little bit. So
Yeah.
um, I'm over here in a little town called Enniskillen, which is in County Fermanagh, something like that, on the south end of Northern Ireland. So I'm in my glorious hotel room. But we've managed to get it going. The Wi-Fi is working. So take the opportunities as they come along. Keeping well, Stu?
Yeah, good, mate. Productive Saturday. Another working weekend, back to back. That's the way it falls. But we've had a productive day. Little one goes swimming. Daddy goes to work. Turfing job at my parents. And then we've been sorting garden stuff out. So we're all a bit pooped now. But good to sit down and put another session in now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll do the usual check-in. Still sober and no temptations?
Still very so. No temptations. A couple of days. I wouldn't call them mental health wobbles, but just tiredness. And you know when you're tired, as everyone is. I'm sure this isn't a mental health thing, but when you're tired and you have a bad day, it just seems that much worse, doesn't it? And then if you're prone to anxiety, that your mind can wander to if am I going to have a bad spell? But I've still managed my running, and we've had a blooming good Saturday, so we'll forget about last Thursday and Friday. They're gone, and we move forward.
Excellent. Now, you raise a good point there as well, because I think when you're both physically and mentally tired, and before we started recording, you said you've done a 12-day stretch, so that doesn't help, and then you've been running every day as well. But physical and mental tiredness means that those little molehills become giant mountains, don't they? And your ability to rationalize and gain perspective is skewed.
We've talked about triggers, haven't we, in previous episodes? And perhaps it takes less to trigger one, and something that, like you say, may have been a small stumbling block earlier in the week, later in the week when you're feeling it a bit. It takes a little bit more getting over, and it could be absolutely anything, couldn't it? But we battle on.
Exactly. But I think this is kind of like an epilogue to the last episode, really. That if you're recognizing that from a mental health point of view, that this is a blip, a small trip, rather than a spiral into something more serious, then that's kind of a good position to be in. Like the self-awareness is kind of, I guess, key, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, 4 years ago, let's say, today I would have woken up with a hangover, and Thursday and Friday that weren't, nothing major happened. They just weren't particularly great days. And Saturday would have been escalated with a hangover. I wouldn't have done anything. I'd have been grumpy with wife and child. We'd have all been grumpy rather than having a good productive day. But that's not necessarily the fact that I haven't had alcohol. I am now more aware of the processes, or I have processes in place to deal with the bad days. And obviously not drinking alcohol is a huge benefit as well for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of segued nicely, I guess, from where we were in the last episode, or the last two episodes, which were very much mental health focused, and the kind of the vicious circle that you can fall into from a mental health, but then exacerbated more with alcohol consumption. And I guess this really, in the way that we've planned this series, this is probably the last episode in the drinking days. Before we move on to phase two. So we've kind of put a flag in the ground just to talk about that mental health and the difficulties that brings. But today we're going to really focus on probably the last 5 or 6 weeks leading up to a hospital admission for you, which kind of spelt the end of your drinking days. But really, this is kind of the shit hitting the fan.
Yes.
Over the course of 6 weeks. And I don't know how to articulate it other than, it was either go to hospital and listen to the advice, or go to hospital, come out, start drinking, which probably would have ended your life eventually.
Probably before
Yeah.
March 2018, we reckon.
Yeah.
Quite possibly. We're talking now. You say the shit hits the fan. We could kick this episode off by saying the bats nearly hit Stuart's car, which is where this sort of episode and the final drinking days, the final drinking day started. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense. So what you're describing really is that the abuse had got so much that cognitively there was an impact in that you experienced some quite frightening hallucinations.
I did, yeah.
Talk us through those.
Well, I think there was 2 occasions. A little prelude to what I'm about to say is, I've always had a fear of spiders. My job at work in the old days involved opening up a lot of irrigation boxes, valves, in the ground where on the golf course you'll find a lot of the gubbins of the irrigation is hidden in the ground. Obviously, underground boxes are prone to spiders and insects. Anyway, long story short, I used to go to bed and close my eye when my drinking was becoming really excessive. I'd close my eyes and see spiders, but that was only when I closed my eyes. I had a couple of bad nights where I literally couldn't sleep because I'd close my eyes and have these vivid images of spiders. But this happened, we're talking mid-November now, so mid-November 2017, driving to work, as we said in the previous episode, 5 o'clock, so it's very dark. And I got to about half a mile from work, and as far as I was concerned, a very large horde of bats swooped and attempted to sideswipe my car, which obviously didn't happen. In my head, they made a very aggressive sort of swipe towards my side window, and I flinched and drove the 5 minutes to work. And I was really, really, really shaken up. Like, what the effing hell has just happened?
So you got visual hallucinations. Were you getting auditory as well? Were they hitting the car and kind of making a dent noise, or were they squawking or whatever bats do?
No, I don't think there was. I don't remember. I just remember something, coming across. I spotted something, and then I assume my mind was playing tricks on me and has exaggerated the story. But no, I don't believe that. And it was a 2 or 3 second thing, down, swoop across, gone. They didn't come back for more, thankfully. But yeah, no, I don't remember any audio experience with it.
No, I get, and I guess that I've never had that experience, and thankfully to have like a hallucination like that. However, have you ever seen the film Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas?
Possibly, but I can't remember it.
Okay, it's got Johnny Depp in it. He's playing like an alcoholic, drug-riddled reporter from back in the day, and based in Vegas, and he has some really significant hallucinations while he's driving his car, which is not too dissimilar to what you've just described. And even just watching that made my palms sweaty. So I can kind of guess, if you're living it, it must have been, the urge to even just veer off the road, the what if scenario of crashing and all of that sort of shit could have been terrifying.
Well, there was definitely a swerve in the road to try and avoid whatever my mind had pictured or seen. And very, very, very shaken. In fact, so shaken that I got to work, and Mick was there. And then the deputy head greenkeeper turned up, and I can't remember his exact words, but I wasn't looking my best any mornings back then. But he came in and immediately said, "Are you all right?" To which I immediately said, "No." I didn't explain what it was. He said, "Do you want to go home?" And normally, I'd have plodded on because I was probably only doing a morning back there. I'd have battled through 2 or 3 hours. Good old Stu battling through. Seems sad, doesn't it? But I instantly said, "No, I'm not all right, and I need to go home." And I remember before leaving work, I called my wife and said, "I'm coming home. I'll explain it when I get there, but things are not good." Obviously, I didn't explain that this was all alcohol related.
Yeah. So you've driven yourself home?
Yeah, I drove myself home, very shaky from what I can remember. Let's be straight. This is this was just as things were bad, but we're really getting bad. So my memories of back then aren't great, but I wouldn't have been in a good way.
Okay. And I'm going to take a shot in the dark. You get home and then have a drink to settle the nerves?
I assume so. My wife, because my wife would have still been, I'd have been home by 5:30, 5:45, but she'd have been off to work by 7:30. So I have that. Well, I probably would have drunk, at this time of my drinking, I would have probably drunk before she was within half a mile from the front. I wouldn't even have checked to see if she got to the end of the road. I'd have just had a drink. I was drinking, once the door was closed by then.
Yeah. So was that the only case of hallucination, or did you have other examples? Was that the one that's in the mind? Because
I think there was one more after that, but I can't remember when. So that's the one that sticks in my mind, and I just remember it being what I pictured it as a horde of bats. And it was not happy bats either.
Ever happy bat?
Yeah.
So we're talking about the last kind of 6 weeks of drinking, and you've come home from work there, and I know that specifics are just impossible for you in recalling here, but how much time were you spending at work in these last 6 weeks?
After the bat incident, I would have said I'd have probably tried to go back 2 or 3 days and try and get through a 3 or 4 hour morning shift, but it wouldn't have, I in my head, I knew why everything that was happening. I knew it was all happening to me because of how much I was drinking, and I guess things were falling by the wayside. And that day was probably when work fell by the wayside. That was I can't. My boss would probably have a diary, my attendance record, but I'd be amazed if I went back hardly at all between then and entering hospital.
Okay. And do you remember at all the type of excuses that you were putting forward to say, I'm not going to be in work today because?
Well, the Reynards with my hands was how this all started, but then it was purely anxiety.
Right. Okay. So using that to kind of as a justifiable reason not to be in work.
Yeah, I'd just throw a blanket over the whole period. It wasn't, I basically signed myself off. I can't remember if it was in the new year, but I did get signed off by the doctor for a period of 2 weeks at some point, and he informed me that that could be topped up at the end of, well, I don't know the exact time frame, but I was signed off indefinitely for a period of time.
Okay. So what were you having any physical symptoms at this point? Were you Well, it's a fairly open question. It's a fairly straightforward question.
Yeah, well, I guess I think we discussed them previously, didn't we? I mean, I was living on my nerves, but I always felt short of breath. I always felt like my heart was racing. Um, Probably not in this sort of period as after I've just experienced the hallucinations, but not long into December, the bruising started to develop, and you'll be able to explain that, won't you? But no, I just felt like I was living on my nerves. I was starting to get a bit, not skinny, but my face was starting to get a bit drawn. You know that when you're sort of like,
So you're not eating? Is this part of it?
again, living off it was the Parma ham and the Haribo. I used to like a cheese and onion top bap if I was really hungry. But no, I wasn't. My appetite was non-existent. I could have easily, I could have easily not eaten at any point, any day.
Yeah. So just reversing back a little bit, just to explain for anybody that didn't listen to whether it was episode 2 or 3 of the kind of the first run of your Henry Weston's Old Mate, you and I did a podcast and I explained a little bit about why the bruising happens in alcoholism, and it's really around the liver being the command center for your clotting system for your blood. And when you are abusing your liver to the extent that we're hearing about and you're describing, the clotting system just goes to shit. So if you cut yourself, you'll bleed for a long time. But if you just knock yourself on some corner of a table or whatever, you will come out with an excessive bruise for the impact that you've taken. And that's just a sure sign that your liver is not doing what it should do in that scenario. So you'd mentioned as well that towards the end, you'd said in a previous podcast that you were starting to be sick.
Yeah, I was sick every morning for a period of months leading up to the end of the active drinking, and towards this period now, the end of the drinking, the sick was on not every day, but at some days was particularly. It looked like blood, but it was blacker. I'm colourblind. It didn't look dark, but it looked black to me. It could have been dark. I assumed it was blood because I guess you just do if you're not, if you're not medically trained or have a grasp on these things. I assumed I was puking up blood, but I may have that for a day or two, and then that would settle down. We will get on to further in this episode to the point where it didn't settle down. But some mornings I'd really bring up one, and you'd like to think something like that would be alarming, but it kind of just became, once it happened once and I carried on drinking and it stopped the next day, you think, I'm glad that's gone, glad that stopped.
So let's describe then the physiology of that in terms and what you're seeing. So it would be blood, absolutely. Right. So in kind of the physiology in medicine, we would describe that as having coffee ground vomit. It looks like freeze-dried coffee granules. And so if you think that fresh blood is bright red, and blood that has had time to sit and congeal tends to be much darker, and eventually a scab goes brown or black, doesn't it, if you cut your arm or something like that. So if you are drinking excessively, there's a couple of things that could happen. One is you get kind of gastric or esophageal varices, which is like the veins in your esophagus, so your food pipe, for those that need a bit of a physiology kind of orientation, that the veins in your esophagus can enlarge to the point where they burst.
Right.
Okay? And then it's not a vomiting thing. It's you're projectile losing blood out of your face, and it's bright red, and it's an emergency situation. Another thing that can happen, which is what you're describing, is it's almost like a a chemical gastritis. So you've drunk so much that the lining of your stomach wall, all that protective layer and the enzymes and all those things are being stripped away, and it's probably oozing blood. So not to the extent that you'd see with an ulcer that's burst, but it's along those lines. So you'll start to see a, like I say, just an oozing of blood, and it probably improves overnight because you've got somewhere between 4 and 8 hours where you're not drinking, so it has time to kind of those enzymes build up and those sorts of things. But one of the first things that you do in the morning is you get up and you've got salty blood in your stomach, and it's like, if you drink enough seawater, you're gonna puke. So you've got salty blood in your stomach, and up it comes, and then you've got what you've described. So plugged a gap for you there.
Yeah, it was a very unpleasant experience, that, I must say. But in a sober state of mind, you would report to your significant other, or if you lived alone, you would probably seek a appointment with your GP. You'd like to think, wouldn't you? But for in the alcoholic or the mind of the addict, you kind of you go through, you drink through that for today and hope it's not there tomorrow.
Yeah.
And if it's not there tomorrow, you hope it's not there. And in my case, until the very end, it used to go away for a period of time. It didn't stop me drinking. It didn't stop me. It didn't stop. I had it got to the point. Again, we'll get to it shortly. I had it got to the point where I couldn't keep the stuff down. I could have a drink and it would stay down. I'd do that in the morning, and then that would be that till the following morning.
Okay, so it kind of raises a question really as well. So if you're not at work a lot and you're starting your drinking earlier than you have done before, how are you getting away with it? It's kind of like, are you still, you're not functioning in the way that you were, but you were very good at hiding it. So how is that developing in any way, or is it getting worse? Are you still?
Yeah, I mean, the excuses, I remember, obviously, I had to interact with my wife early mornings now. I would get up, or I'd be awake. When I wasn't going to work, I'd still wake up at work time. So I would be around. And my wife very quickly, when I was around in the mornings, noticed my shaking. We probably should have mentioned that. I didn't mention it when you asked me about my physical things. I was shaking a lot before I had my first drink of the day. And I remember one time my wife particularly said, "Stuart, you're really shaking." And I said, "Oh, I'm just cold or whatever." But I didn't realise how shaky I was. But I obviously must have been very shaky for my wife to notice it. If I had to hold anything, I would notice it the minute I had a glass in my hand, that would shake. But I'd try and drink a cup of coffee, I'd shake on my teeth. But yeah, so you have to make an excuse for that. I remember I'd be shaking. I'd be straight out to the co-op. Once my wife had left, I'd literally follow her down the road in my car, and I'd be shaking. I remember reaching for coins in my pocket in the co-op one day, and again noticing the coins actually making quite a loud noise in the supermarket, which was a little bit embarrassing, which is strange because I had 2 litres of vodka in my basket at 7:35. That should have been embarrassing, not shaking hands. But so yeah, the excuses have to try and get a bit better, which they weren't. And I was now starting to wake up needing a drink. So my mood could be really bad. If I can't remember specific examples, but let's say my wife didn't quite go to work at 7:30, maybe she went in a bit later. That would not have been good for me. That would have been painful.
Yeah. And are you straight on the vodka at 7 o'clock when your wife's leaving the house?
Now, I mean, back now in this, say, what we'll call the final 6 weeks, yes. previously, let's say 6 months before that, if I had some time off or wasn't going to work for any particular reason, I would have been on the ciders. The strong ciders would have been the first hour or two of drinking. But now it's vodka, and it's vodka and fizzy water. It's you know, if we're talking pub measures to give people watching this an idea, I would have been pouring quadruple vodkas with a single shot of fizzy water and drinking that in one straight down with
Right.
with literally no gag reflex either. That could go down like orange squash.
Right. I'm surprised you've not described that before. So yeah, I guess just having being able to visualize that, I guess, is kind of
Yeah,
hits you a little bit, doesn't it? So
it's
so what's
not clever. The thing is, I could have, again, if we go back 6 to 8 weeks, I was drinking when I was still at work. I could come home and, you know, apple sours, the 14% rubbish, whatever it was. I used to pour a bottle of that into a pint glass and drink it in one to get it into me, no problem. And it's not showing off. It's
no,
disgusting, but I could do that easily, and you know, wouldn't even, you know, there was none of that. It just go down, and I'm glad that's out of the way.
right.
Madness.
Wow. Okay. Um, so I think we've either had this in conversation before in planning, or you've described it on one of the podcasts. But there was a strange episode of you just, I don't know, sleepwalking or
Yeah,
drunk walking,
I,
whatever. I don't know.
I don't know. Well, by this period, my wife wasn't around much at the weekends. God, I don't blame her either. But she'd go and see friends, or she'd just go and keep busy away from the house. But she'd stay away overnight. So I would have the weekends to myself, which obviously was great for me from an alcoholic's point of view, but wasn't great for me. That's not my wife's fault. You know, I was a train wreck of a person to be near. But one morning I came to walking. My brain became conscious on the street outside my house with a empty plastic bag in my hand, and I was walking back in the direction of my house. So I could only assume that I had made a late night trip to a local public bin, which I used to do regularly. You know, I couldn't hide my alcohol in our big recycling bin because it was, you know, we're talking bottles and bottles of vodka and cider. So my conscious, I woke up and I was in, I don't wear pajamas, but I was in, you know, slacks. I was in tracksuit bottom and a t-shirt and my flip flops.
Yeah.
Bloody cold because it was winter. And I just came to, and I was like, what the bloody hell am I doing here? It was 3 a.m. I went in, and I probably, because I was awake, I probably went in and just started drinking again because, you know, I had no concept of time there. If my wife came home from work on a Friday and went off and did her thing and was coming back on the Sunday evening, I had no concept of time. I would try and make a mental note that, you know, I had to try and be as sober as possible for Sunday evening, but in between it would have been an absolute free for all.
Right. Okay. So I'm actually surprised as well that we've not had many discussions about. You've said that if you knock yourself, that the bruising and stuff would happen, but how are there not more accidents?
I don't know. Well, I didn't do much. I'd walk down one flight of stairs in the morning, and the way our house is, the living room and the kitchen was a very short walk. But there was one accident where I hurt my hand. It was my thumb, and as you mentioned previously, the blood, it wouldn't stop bleeding. So I plastered it up, and that wasn't enough. So I put numerous plasters on, and then numerous layers of kitchen roll and electrical tape, and thought nothing of it. But put myself to bed one day, and I must have fidgeted around and knocked the dressing off, the homemade dressing. You know, Bear Grylls eat your heart out. But the living room, the bedroom looked like a movie murder scene. Well, my bed sheets. So yeah, there were, I was bashing things. My body, I looked like I'd been in a car crash if you'd have seen me without my shirt on. But there was that one time, and I actually, I think my mum phoned me for some reason, and I didn't ask her for help with the alcohol, but I asked her if she would come up and help, and it must have been a very harrowing experience, not because of the blood, but I was a mental wreck by then, a physical wreck by then, and now my mum had to come up and basically try and clean up, not pints and pints of blood, but it looked pretty gory. It looked like someone had been attacked in there.
Yeah, no, and I guess that must, I guess, trying to put yourself in the shoes of a parent, that must have been terrifying. Not in the sense of, people have accidents and there's blood and stuff like that, but I guess your mum would have been witnessing her son in his mid-30s becoming incapable of looking after himself safely.
Yeah, I was, and questions would have been asked. Again, I can't remember specifics, but my mum would have asked me, is this what is going on? I'd have lied. She'd have pushed and pushed. And pushed probably to the point where I either just didn't say anything. And I tried not to, throw my toy. I used to throw my toys out of my pram with my wife because that was just the easiest way. But with my mum, I tried to be a bit more delicate. But eventually, I'd have sort of added Paddy, and she'd have excused herself and left. But I mean, yeah, I can only imagine what it would have been like coming down to visit me then, because short of interrupting me drinking alcohol, and then even then, I didn't want help. I still didn't want help then, even though I knew this isn't good. We keep saying that, don't we? I knew it wasn't right, but I wasn't ready to stop even then.
Yeah, and I think that's when you're describing what you've said, particularly earlier on, when you're waking up and you've got the shakes, whether you wanted to or not, physically you were dependent on your alcohol, because without it you would have been. Sorry, let me try and restructure that. If you were, in order to stop the shakes and in order to get your day going, you needed a drink. So you were physically dependent on the alcohol to start your day.
Yeah. Those last few weeks, I needed. Once I woke up, I needed alcohol to. Well, I thought I needed alcohol to stop the shakes and settle the brain. Well, I did. I couldn't make a reasoned decision without alcohol, and I probably didn't make any after it. But I couldn't do anything. I had to have a drink.
Okay, so mentally at this point, you've kind of you've rationed. We've talked a little bit about this. You've rationalised kind of the continuing the drinking. We understand why that is, and we've talked about it in other episodes. But we're right near the end at this point. When you cut your hand, you called your mum?
Yeah.
Was there no thought that? Or do you think? What was your reason for calling your mum rather than Mrs. Butler?
Well, I think she probably called me. Oh, she did call me, because I have a vague recollection of being in the bed thinking, how the bloody hell am I going to get this sorted? And my mum phoned, and she probably, I can't say, but she was probably aware of the injury. And I just said, I've had a nightmare. Can you come up and help? And in my mind, I'd have probably been thinking, I'd rather my mum helps me deal with this than try and explain it to my wife or tomorrow when she comes home or whatever. Because this would have been when she was away for a weekend.
Did you have contact with her when she was away?
Not much. She'd check in, but
Yeah.
she'd check in with me. But obviously, I had other priorities, which is a horrible thing to say. I might remember to drop a text, but and we'd try and FaceTime in the evenings because the little one was very young. So Daddy would try and talk to the FaceTime screen, but really, Daddy wanted to put the FaceTime screen down and have another drink. But yeah. I don't. The answer is I don't know to a lot of these things, really.
Okay. Fair enough. So I guess we're getting close to, from what you've described, getting close to kind of the final days before an admission to hospital. So is there anything else that's kind of like leading, like we're really reaching the peak of this escalation? So is there anything else to discuss or talk about in that sense?
Oh, the final. We've got to the point now where my wife was, and please, anyone watching this, okay, might be thinking, well, why didn't Stuart's wife, what was she doing going away at the weekends? She didn't have, to be around me would have been impossible. And she was scheduled to go to Christmas markets in Germany, which she'd earned living with Stu the alcoholic for the last 18 months. And of course, I wasn't being honest. I didn't want her to go because my anxiety was terrible, but I couldn't ask her not to go. And that's when that was a 4-day bender that ended up with me waking up one morning and the blood 6, the coffee ground 6 started, and it continued for a period of, I think, 12 hours. Any time I tried to put anything into my body, a glass of water, a glass of vodka, a what's it, a cola bottle, any time anything hit my stomach, I guess, or I took it into my body, up would come. And if this started at 5 in the morning, my mum then visited 3 in the afternoon, I think. Again, I can't tell you why she visited. And she witnessed, in the period that she stayed with me, I think she probably witnessed me leave the room 3 or 4 times to be sick. At which point, she was very distraught, and she said, "This, Stuart, something's very seriously wrong here." And she came in, and I was starting to get worried because, now, say we're 9 hours into sicking up what I assume is blood. So I showed my mum. She came in, and I was sick into a bowl. And she actually, bless her, she actually took the bowl to the doctors. And the doctor, obviously, he said, "I would suggest to you, Mrs. Butler, that you take your son to hospital because I would assume he has an ulcer or something very unpleasant has popped inside him, and that will not be doing him any good." So that happened about 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the 17th of December 2017. I made my way over to QEQM at Thanet, mate, and shall I just carry on with the final throes of it?
Well, yeah, if you want to. So, let's go.
So we've explained the day. I got over to the hospital. Fortunately, I continued to vomit into a bowl all the way to hospital, and continued to vomit in the waiting room of A&E. And I think a nurse took pity on me, even though it was busy, and I was seen reasonably quickly. And then I was seen by a doctor who asked me what was going on. I didn't tell him what was going on. He drew some blood from me. He stuck a very large needle into, a vein. We discussed this off air, didn't we? Is he looking for more oxygenated blood?
Yeah, so he would probably be thinking about wanting to have blood that comes from your artery, because it gives you a different set of kind of blood markers, which can be more telling for some things. So routinely, everybody would have blood taken from a vein, and that's kind of where you'd get it in the crook of your elbow and that sort of thing. And most people are familiar with that. But to get blood from the artery, it would be literally where the pulse is on your wrist, most common hospitals. And it's painful.
Yes.
No, it's not easy.
I can laugh now. I laugh about most of this experience now, but bloody hell, that was not a pleasant bit of that experience. Yeah, flipping it.
But because it's oxygenated blood, there are certain things that we can look at, we can test, which will give us a few different. Try and get my words out. It paints more of a picture. So if you've got somebody presenting with like a serious issue, you can take the venous blood, but the oxygenated blood kind of colours in the edges as well and gives us a fuller picture, really, I guess.
Okay, well, Mr. Lovely Doctor drew this blood, and by now my middle brother had joined my mum at the hospital and took this blood, and he'd already asked me a couple of times, if my predicament might be anything to do with, my lifestyle, shall we say. And I just said, no, blah, blah, blah. And he took this blood, and it was obviously probably a throwaway comment, but my anxious mind took it as a lot more. He said to me, well, Mr. Butler, I'll take this away and analyze it, and then I'll be able to understand what's really going on. And in my head, I assumed the game was up. He left, and that was my rock bottom moment. I turned to my middle brother Paul and just said to him, enough's enough. I can't do this anymore. I didn't say I'm an alcoholic. I just said to him, this is all alcohol related. Can you go and get the doctor back? I need help. I assume there was some tears. I can't say there was angels. I can't say a huge weight lifted off my shoulder, because I was a complete bloody mess. But that was the time that it stopped.
Yeah. So 17th of December 2017 was the last day you had a drink.
Yes, it was. It was.
Okay. I mean, I don't know about anybody else that will be listening or watching. That's kind of given me goosebumps. I think, I don't know, it's quite a vulnerable description of, and sharing kind of your rock bottom is kind of, just not something that you get to hear about very often. And I think, so I just thank you for that, I guess.
Yeah.
I want to end the episode or the story at that point, because I think we're going to straddle into kind of phase 2, which is, where the immediate help is or what immediate help is recognized. And the story will continue in there. But I just want to kind of scroll back a couple of minutes, and just, you mentioned it about your wife, and throughout all of this, I mean, I have to say that your wife is very, very supportive, very happy for you to share your story. People will hear that we don't use her name very often, and I think that's because she's just not necessarily wanting to draw attention to herself more than anything. It's kind of your story. People might question why she hasn't intervened earlier, and or if she was blind to it all. And I think you said it yourself, and we've said it before in episodes, that you were a tremendous liar.
Yeah, but highly skilled.
Yeah, and I think I would just ask people to exercise caution in making about filling your perceptions until you've walked in somebody else's shoes, because unless you live with an alcoholic who, has the characteristics that you've described, you will not have a fucking clue what it will be like.
No, and yeah, I was. We as addicts do become very, very, very skilled at getting away with, I I I could put time. I could take time out of my drinking to cover my arse, but I couldn't take time out of my drinking to put my daughter to bed. That is the strength of addiction. Like you just said, you have to walk it, and I can only imagine what living with me must have been like. Let's be honest. Lots of people in this world would have either hoofed me out of the door 6 to 8 months prior to what we're discussing, or they'd have walked out the door themselves. And I am one of the lucky people who had someone in my life who was strong enough to put up with it all, almost strong enough in a way to not allow me to hit my rock bottom, but was conscious of the fact that I had to, there was more than my anxiety going on, but I had to be ready to ask for help. And the minute I did ask for help, everyone in my life has helped. And a lot of people outside of my life, people like yourself now, Phil, have jumped on board and are helping me in unbelievable ways. But yeah, there's only one devil in this story, and you're looking at him. He's the Wally wearing the football shirt.
Yeah. All right. I think that was important to say, because I think it's a gap in the story that you're not able to tell, because you were preoccupied with your own addiction. And I think it's only until we hear the voices, and that isn't a kind of a suggestion that Mrs. Butler's going to join us at any point. That's for her to keep her counsel and share if she wants to. But until we hear those stories, you don't know, and we don't know how bad that must have been. So
yeah.
Okay, so it feels, well, we've come to an end there. I was fighting the urge to try and lighten the mood, but I have fought the urge, and we won't lighten the mood because there's no need to. But yeah, I've enjoyed that session. Sounds a bit random, but it's been so insightful, and I think just getting to the point where rock bottom is described in that detail is really helpful. So we will be picking up and recording again at some point next week, and this is the kind of phase 2 of the Butler story. You're in hospital, and you've had your last drink ever, but looking forwards now rather than covering your ass, as you've said.
Yes, there was for people watching this, we get sober, but life doesn't get easy for a while.
Okay. And there's so many things in this that we use this phrase quite a lot, but I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
And what you're going to describe in terms of that almost feels like this Hollywood moment of, I've hit rock bottom, my world we're going to have dancing fucking or leaping rabbits and deers and kind of Walt Disney sort of, but what you've just said probably describes the reality is that it's not going to be that easy.
No, I had been managing my anxiety, my worsening anxiety for 18 months with alcohol abuse. And we talked about white knuckling 2 episodes ago. We really start to white knuckle shit now.
Right. Okay. Let's stop because we're starting to get stuff away. Okay. So we will catch up next week. Obviously, anybody who wants to get in touch, we'll be glad to hear from you. So the Gmail address is hwom. I have to think that through every time, at gmail.com.
Yeah, let's put it that side now. We'll put it on that side.
Or at StuButts on Twitter. If you've got comments, questions, remarks, anything, obviously just say what you like, but keep it friendly. And we will we'll speak to you again at some point soon. But cheers, Stuart. Really enjoyed.
Yeah, I think what we perhaps we'll sneak this in at the end of the episode. We will try and get an episode in where we try and maybe get 4 or 5 listeners' questions and go through them from a recovering addict's point of view, and we can tap into potentially Phil's medical knowledge. So fire us some questions, anything. Why didn't you stop drinking, Stu? When you cut your finger off, why didn't you stop drinking? Ask me, and I'll try my best to tell you.
That's it. It'll be like a press conference episode.
Yes.
Let's do that. Okay, cool. See you soon, mate. Take care.
Thank you so much, Phil. Cheers, mate.